how the median voter operates, and he hanged himself. But in any case, let's get started with the USA Today piece. 25 minutes long. It's not that long. They just kind of cooked my ass, and we'll move on from there. I don't think they cooked my ass necessarily. They cooked themselves, but they were very contentious. Let's take a look.
The conflicts in the Middle East are changing the way that young Americans look at Israel. But the political debate is also leaving the door open for extremist views to enter the mainstream, from the far right.
I think that Jews are causing a disproportionate amount of problems in the United States.
To the far left.
You f***ing baying pig! You f***ing bloodthirsty, violent pig dog!
Anti-Semitism.
That right off the jump, like, that's a hatchet job, okay? Right off the rip, that's a fucking hatchet job. Like, comparing me to Dan Bilzerian, you're not going to make anybody... You are not going to be able to get people on your side with this. So the question I have is, who is this for? Did Jonathan Greenblatt write this article? Did you write this specifically for a couple people, like the last remaining people in this country that care about this sort of stuff, like genuinely care about anti-Semitism, but also at the same time are like very, very pro-Israel? Like, who is this for?
Is resurging around the world, and it's reaching dangerous levels.
2025 was one of the most violent periods.
And right on cue, you got Jonathan motherfucking Greenblatt.
We've seen in memory, over 200 acts of violence committed against Jewish people.
I'm Will Carlos, and I've made it my mission to examine how extremist movements are gradually becoming mainstream in America. This is extremely normal. I'm here in Tampa, Florida, at a campaign rally for James Fishback. He's a long-shot candidate for governor on the Republican ticket, but he's attracted many young men with far-right beliefs over a specific issue: Israel.
Look, you can love Israel, you can hate Israel, but last time I checked, this is the United States of America. I have a crazy, radical, maybe it makes me an extremist, but here's a very simple statement. No American should ever die for Israel.
Like, here's the other side of this story. When you show someone, this is controversial opinion, but when you show someone like James Fishback, who is actually anti-Semitic, who is like unbelievably racist, but then while you're making an argument about his anti-Semitism, you show him making like a coherent point, you don't end up making that coherent point look anti-Semitic. You just make him look not anti-Semitic, or even worse, you make everybody go, wait, if that's anti-Semitic, I'm fucking anti-Semitic. This is something that a lot of the anti-extremism space has not been able to identify, unfortunately. And I think partially because so many of these guys, myself included, like, I've been doing this for years, right? You know this. I've been working in combating extremism, far-right extremism, my entire life, okay? And I used to be friends with a lot of these people. I used to see a lot of these people as my peers. One of the craziest things that I realized is that a good deal of the combating far-right extremism space was straight up only doing this because they were using it as a valid way to identify anti-Israel anti-Semites. Okay, straight up. This doesn't mean the entirety of this anti-right-wing extremism movement and all of these like civil rights advocacy organizations are like the ADL, but many of them are like that. It's unfortunate, but it's true. A lot of the big donors to these institutions, I thought, were legitimately invested in combating fascism, no matter where it was coming from, even if it's the fascism demonstrated by Zionism. It's a very sad state of affairs that turns out a lot of these like anti-far right guys simply were just looking at Nazis because Nazis were some of the most common and most visible aspects of the anti-Israel movement in this country for the longest time. It's sad. There are people who have obviously been fired or have quit their jobs at the ADL who at once was billed as a civil rights organization. You can dispute that, understandably dispute that, but there were people who I think genuinely believed that the ADL was supposed to be combating anti-Semitism, but also combating numerous other forms of far-right extremism. But when Israel is the far-right extremist country, and your job is specifically to defend Israel and to take out its most prominent critics, some of which are going to be Nazis, some of which are going to be actual anti-Semites, but because your primary focus is combating anti-Zionism, well, you can't really be a genuine. You can't really be a genuine ally in the fight against far-right radicalization. You're actually fomenting far-right radicalization. You're actually defending far-right radicalization. It's just if it's Jewish supremacist, if it's pro-Israel, then you don't see it. As a matter of fact, you like it. As a matter of fact, you defend it.
The main thing is the way he goes and stands up for America against Israel. He's the only politician doing that.
I feel like we're not allowed to criticize them at all, and then any criticism is just immediately shut down as anti-Semitism.
I think that the average American is fed up. They are fed up as they were 5 or 6 years ago when folks in the Democrat Party would criticize any opinion contrary to DEI or affirmative action as racist. And now, if you criticize Netanyahu, if you criticize the fact that we're sending $5 billion there, we're spending $200 billion per the Pentagon's request on this war that, in the words of Secretary of State Marco Rubio, says is because of Israel's preemptive attack, that is deemed as anti-Semitic.
But the popularity of Fishback's attacks on Israel isn't just specific to his belief in the country's financial and military dependence on the United States. He's also gained a lot of fans in the far-right Gen Z group known as Groypers for his use of phrases and rhetoric that have been labeled deeply anti-Semitic.
If you wanted to set up our kids for failure, you would feed them the absolute goy slop in our cafeterias.
Goy slop is an anti-Semitic internet slang term combining goy, a Hebrew Yiddish term for a non-Jew, and slop, meaning low-quality food. Originating...
We will never have a serious conversation about Zionism or even combating anti-Semitism because of the way that Jews were historically viewed in the Western world as a marginalized identity, as a minority, versus what Israel represents, what Zionism represents, or even like the contemporary Jewish existence. Like, is there systematic discrimination against Jews in the United States of America or broadly in the Western world? No, of course not. Is there actual anti-Semitism, specifically anti-Semitism growing in the Western world? Of course, yes, that is happening. So this is the problem. The problem is that, like, we can't have a normal conversation about even something like goy slop because on the one hand, it is a terminology that neo-Nazis use all the fucking time. Okay, it's a signal. It's a signal to say, like, I know this thing. It's also funny, but that's besides the point, right? But here is the problem. The way that, like, goyim is deployed in Israel is very different than the way that it was mass adopted by the neo-Nazi movement in the West. So if you're bracketing Jews as a contemporarily marginalized identity that receives tremendous amounts of systematic discrimination in the same vein as like black or brown people, right? If that's your assessment, which many of these groups do, many of these advocacy organizations do that, to the average person, you're not going to be able to get your point across at all because it's also not true, right? It's just not true. And that's the problem. Is shoe on head a factor? Why you cloth like these days? I have no idea what you're trying to say, but I hope you have a wonderful Friday, my friend. Cloth like this? In any case, The worst part is that even those of us who oppose anti-Semitism and understand the role Zionism plays in exacerbating it have to ultimately accept that anti-Semitism will probably continue to rise even if Zionism is dismantled purely due to the lingering personal effects that 75 years of Zionism have created in the broader public conscience. It won't go away overnight, even if Israel ended tomorrow. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I always figured it just meant non-Jewish. I mean, most people don't use it as a derogatory term, but some do. Because being non-Jewish in Israel is being second class, which therein lies the problem, because it's topsy-turvy. Historically, we have been taught, for understandable reasons, about the systematic marginalization of Jews, the pogroms, the Holocaust, right? Like marginalization that has led to tremendous amounts of violence that Jews have faced, right? Expulsions, death, destruction of their culture, all this stuff. Now, of course, in contemporary society, there's nothing of that sort, right? Especially in the post-World War II universe that we're living in, there is no systematic discrimination, or rather, even the systemic factors of discrimination that existed in the post-World War II universe in the United States of America have gone away. Right? Like there was a reason why Jews would create their own law firms. Jews would create their own advertising agencies. Jews would create their own like secondary market that doesn't exist anymore, right? Like their own publishers. That was because they were outcast systemically from the regular, the regular WASP firms that were dominated by white Anglo-Saxon Protestants for the longest time. So that's not the case any longer. And it hasn't been the case for, I would say, the last like 4 decades, 5 decades at this point. I don't know what the actual turning point is, but it's like clear that that doesn't exist. Like the systematic discrimination does not exist any longer. And yet a lot of these advocacy organizations that want to defend Israel will make it seem as though this systematic form of discrimination still exists. Like, are Jews non-white? Is that what's going on? Are Jews being treated as non-whites? For some, that is the case, right? There are some people out there who look at the primarily Ashkenazi Jewish population that lives in the United States of America and say they're not white. But those people are usually, let's be real, anti-Semites. Okay? By and large, for the average American, Jews are white. They don't see Jews as anything but white people. It's in most respects, it's seen as, like an Irish guy or a Polish guy, right? Maybe a special kind of white at most, but still white. So that's a real issue in identifying anti-Semitic markers and then having this kind of approach to it where it's like, well, someone says goy slop, it's like anti-Semitic. It by and large, usually in most circumstances, the person utilizing this terminology is probably anti-Semitic in the Western world. But there's also the other side of this.
Around 2016 on 4chan, it's used to describe processed, unhealthy food or low-quality media, alleging a conspiracy that Jewish elites are promoting these products to make non-Jewish people unhealthy and submissive.
Well, I meant to be funny.
Okay, but
I meant to be funny.
Why was
in the same way, growing up, my mother, who was born in South America, would call what my dad would make gringo slop sometimes as a kid. So I mean, was that a...
Yeah, it's also, as we already know, the Groyper movement is the most diverse movement in this country, ironically enough. Like, with the exception of, I think, having like black people in it, the Groyper movement is like fairly diverse, probably more diverse than like maybe even a DSA meeting. James Fishback is, of course, carrying the torch of that diversity, being, a visibly non-white person who is unbelievably white supremacist.
Conspiracy against every single Hispanic person in the United States? Of course not.
Well, no, but goy slop, as far as I understand it, the idea is that this is food that is being foisted on non-Jews by a sort of Jewish cabal to weaken them in some way, right? I mean, that's the conspiracy. That's what you were tipping your hat to.
I don't know that conspiracy reflects what I actually spoke about, which is our public school cafeterias are feeding kids absolute garbage with high fructose corn syrup, high sodium. Well, that's not particularly punchy or funny. And so I'm going to do things that are funny, that are punchy. I wish we would spend less time talking about word choice and more time talking about the issue that we have an obesity crisis in my state. We have a hunger crisis in my state.
Like, this needs to be delicate. You need to be delicate. If you're fucking looking at anti-Semitic dog whistles and like objectively anti-Semitic people, you have to be a little bit more delicate. And I hear him, I hear what James Fishback is saying, and I see the way he's defending himself as a nod, right? This is something that anti-Semites do all the fucking time. Like, to be like, oh, what are you talking about? I'm brown. How dare you accuse me of such a heinous smear? Except the problem is, if you are going to turn around and say, this is the other side of this argument to try to find some fucking ideological parity where none exists, you are going to give him credence. When you slap the other side of this as Hasan does this too, okay, you're giving James Fishback credence. You're giving him legitimacy. No one is going to fucking take this argument seriously. No one is going to comb through his assessment, especially when like the worst things you can say about what James Fishback has said about like, international, it's not necessarily like international Jewry or more like objectively and obviously directly anti-Semitic shit, and simply things that he has said that he can easily say, oh, like, I'm just joking here. You know what I mean? Especially in this day and age where TikTok has basically taken the 4chan terminology and made it appropriate for mass consumption. It gets a lot more difficult to identify who's actually doing the fake, I'm not an anti-Semite to fuck around, and who actually isn't an anti-Semite. There's also the other side of this where you're boosting their popularity. You're offering them more legitimacy.
I agree with you, but respectfully, I think you made that the conversation when you used that term.
Perhaps.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. Perhaps, but I don't regret the use of that term whatsoever. What I think we have to do is spend less time trying to police language and more time actually getting to the issues.
Anti-Semitism has of course been around for centuries, but it's seeing a resurgence, particularly in America, around the same time that the Israeli government has invaded and attacked Gaza, in response to the Hamas-led terrorist attacks against Israel on October 7th, 2023. That conflict has been deeply unpopular among Americans, many of whom see Israel as having taken a disproportionately violent response. But here's the thing. While a lot of Americans blame the current Israeli government, the backlash...
Do you regret having the policy of not having covered or platformed Nick Fuentes in the past that is shutting him down, given how much prominence he's gained now? No, it was the appropriate thing to do at the time, but it's over now.
...has also come against Jews in general, across the globe, and especially here in the US. And this scapegoating, blaming Jews at large for the actions of the Israeli government, has been seized upon by internet-savvy influencers with extreme views.
I'm just going to come out and say it. Like, I think that Jews are causing a disproportionate amount of problems in the United States.
Jews are money changers, bullshit artists, psychopaths, charlatans, grifters, manipulators.
That's also led to outward minimization or even full denial of the Holocaust, one of the most tragic events in human history, which led to the deaths of more than 6 million Jews.
Ever since the Holocaust, the alleged Holocaust of roughly 6 million Jews, give or take some millions.
There's so many problems with it, and to exterminate that many people in that period of time.
Like, you can't front load this level of anti-Semitic commentary that's like directly anti-Semitic commentary and then be like, and on the other hand, here's Hasan. And then the only thing you can point to is me being like, yeah, it'll be really funny if, and then I use the term inbred one fucking time over the course of 10,000 hours of fucking commentary, many of which prominently features me combating anti-Semitism while simultaneously talking about anti-Zionism. What are you doing? What the fuck are you doing?
Simply put, there weren't enough ovens.
Let's talk about the Holocaust. Do you believe the Holocaust happened?
Do I believe that the German government killed innocent Jews? Yes.
Do you believe that, the number that's always cited is 6 million people. Do you believe 6 million people died in the Holocaust?
So, I to tell you the truth,
I haven't seen this other side, but now it's beginning to make sense to me why he asked me such dumb questions. I don't know if he featured all of our interview because we talked for like an hour and 30 minutes. And now I'm beginning to realize why he asked me those questions as well. And I was like, yeah, of course. What the fuck are you talking about? And I couldn't comprehend the way this was pitched to me. And I knew that it was going to be a rat fuck. But the way this was pitched to me was like, I'm in this space. I've combated far-right radicalization. I've combated anti-Semitism. And therefore, like, you know, they're trying to get my perspective on like the growth of anti-Semitism broadly. Okay. And the interview that I conducted with this guy, we talked extensively. We talked extensively about the dangers of anti-Semitism and like how it's working on the far right, how it's growing on the far right. And then he would ask me questions like this. And I found that very odd because I was like, why the fuck would I deny the Holocaust? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just couldn't, like, I can't remember because this was a long time ago, but it's just like very strange that at the time, I thought it was like an odd interview.
I've spent more of my time thinking about the history of Florida, the history of our state, how we can make that great. I haven't spent a lot of time studying Holocaust history. I know that time and again in US history, we've been told one thing only to have it debunked later. What I can unequivocally tell you is that the genocide of Jews by the...
You're in the video for like 2 minutes. He talks about you more than you're in the video. Yeah, I think there's a reason for that. We did an extensive sit down. That was long as fuck. We talked for hours. We talked for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. We went way over. If he only put 5 minutes in there and mostly just talks about me, that's because they couldn't get anything out of it.
German government was a tragedy. It should never happen again. I'm not sure why we are talking about the Holocaust in 2026, to tell you the truth. I don't think we should crack down on legitimate speech. I think we should absolutely condemn any form of religious hatred, including against Jews. But there always has to be...
So isn't that a good thing then, that we talk about the Holocaust? If we want to ensure that these things don't happen again and we want to keep, you know, religious
But when we
hatred...
talk about the Holocaust in the context of having a debate about Israel or Benjamin Netanyahu or AIPAC, why would that be relevant?
I think it's relevant because it's all within the context of Israel defending itself, right? And Jewish people defending themselves, which is what they claim the war is about, right? Is about defense, and it's about offense for defense, and it's about ensuring that there isn't another Holocaust and that they don't get wiped out again, right? Or almost wiped out.
So this war doesn't appear that is in fact the case when upwards of 80,000 civilians rather, have been killed at the hands of the Israeli government in Gaza. We have to have a real conversation about what is happening in the Middle East. There's this often question, does Israel have a right to exist? No country has a right to exist. People are endowed with the right to exist.
You don't want this guy being the fucking credible guy here, unless you are directly trying to present anti-Zionist speech as being inherently anti-Semitic. And I'm sorry, I think that's precisely the point for this piece. They're showing a guy who's objectively anti-Semitic and a grifter and a snake who was like, you know, hanging out with Barry Weiss a couple months prior to his congressional run where he decided to be a groiper. Okay? When you have a guy like that also make coherent points, when your perspective on Israel is coming from an out and about like neo-Nazi, okay, you're not doing a service to Jews. You're certainly not actually combating anti-Semitism. You think you're doing a good job fighting back against anti-Zionism to present it as anti-Semitic because here's an anti-Semitic guy, right? Here's an anti-Semitic guy making the same points that someone like myself makes, right? All of a sudden, you're like, see, these guys are they're all anti-Semitic. Anyone who says anything about Israel that makes these realistic points that have been made not just by James Fishback or not even just by myself, but points that are indistinguishable and dare I say identical to what Norm Finkelstein has said about Israel, to what Ilan Pappé has said about Israel, to what Avi Shlaim has said about Israel, to Gideon Levy's assessment. Half of the people that I just mentioned also currently live in Israel. Ilan Pappé and Norm don't, but Ilan Pappé is Israeli. Avi Shlaim is Israeli. Gideon Levy is Israeli and lives in Israel still. Gabor Mate is a Holocaust survivor who has also said these exact same things that James Fishback is saying. So it's important for, I think, people who care about anti-Semitism, who care about right-wing attitudes growing in society, who care about anti-Semitism growing in society, okay? What? Yeah, let's make the 9/11 guy the face of the level-headed anti-Israel movement. Bro, I love you, but we have to get rid of the parasitic state of Israel and stop the genocide. We need to bring regular normies on board against Israel. I'm not even going to dignify that with a response.
Through self-defense, through self-determination. I don't believe that these...
Dog, you just looked at James Fishback, a fucking groiper, and I'm criticizing making a groiper the face of the anti-Zionist movement, and you literally said he's the normal guy? That's what you... Are you okay? I'm the 9/11 guy? Who do you think is who do you think is more normal or closer to the average person's perspective? Me or the guy who's like Byron Donalds is black?
Israeli government has a permanent right to exist regardless of electoral outcomes, geopolitical considerations, the will of the people. But Jewish people anywhere in the world, but especially in the United States of America, absolutely have a right to exist.
This talking point about Israel's right to exist and self-determination has become one of the most hotly debated issues when it comes to Israel and Jews as a people. The key term here is Zionism, which refers to a movement and belief that Jewish people have the right to self-determination and a state of their own. It serves as the foundation of Israel as a country after the Holocaust. But people I spoke with across the country on the left and the right use that term Zionist in a sort of automatically derogatory way. They define Zionism not as...
Yeah, this was a conversation that took place with me as well, and I think I did a pretty good job at responding to it. Let's see what they put in.
To existence and safety, but instead equate Zionism with Israel's expansion into the West Bank and Gaza. Young people at right-wing political events and...
Yeah, I wonder why people on the left would equate Israel and Zionism, the underpinning ideology that developed the nation state of Israel, which is a settler colonial expansionist state that started off with the ethnic cleansing of 750,000 indigenous Palestinians. I wonder why people would equate that. I wonder why academics would equate Zionism with exactly what Zionism is and was and has been. Making this argument as though it's like a crazy thing to say in 2026, when prominent Jews who live in Israel, academics, are finally coming to terms with this reality, and they're trying to basically game it out in a way where they're like trying to slowly but surely get people to comprehend what Zionism is by talking about what Zionism, in air quotes, has become. Omar Bartov is the, of course, person that I'm talking about. Omar Bartov is a Holocaust scholar. He's Jewish, he's Israeli. He wrote a book about what Zionism has turned into. Now, many people will look at that and say, what do you mean what Zionism has turned into? This is what Zionism always has been. I see something positive in that experience. What I see is a guy who's lived his whole life in Israel as a Jewish guy who is a prominent Holocaust historian coming to terms with the reality that Zionism has become and maybe always has been a right-wing fascist ideology. Obviously, it takes some time for people like Omar Bartov to basically come to terms with that reality. It's just cope, but it's healthy, okay? It's healthy cope in some respects, because that means that like certain things that you never could discuss, certain things that would immediately outcast you, no matter how prominent of an academic you might be as a Jew, are now being openly discussed even in Israeli society. Now, has it taken root in Israeli society, this ideology that like the founding ideology of the settler colonial state has maybe merged into something fascistic? I don't think so. But ultimately, there is a movement in the positive direction, a movement in the direction of truth. Okay? That's it.
Left-wing protest.
The reason why I'm bringing all that up is because, like, I'm not alone in this assessment. This is the assessment of many scholars. Okay? This is the assessment of many scholars. This is the assessment of a lot of thoughtful people who've poured their whole lives' work into this. Even people who come from that background of assuming that Israel is actually a force for good, a place for Jews to feel safe, a place where, you know, the Holocaust can never happen again. Like, even if they've grown up with this mentality, they're finally recognizing that it's fucking bullshit. It's not just, you know, random scary Muslim guy or 9/11 guy in the way that some dumb fucks were trying to explain it in the chat. It's the assessment of many Jewish scholars as well. Not that it matters. It's the assessment of many humanitarian rights organizations and many scholars in general. It's a fucking right-wing ideology.
Tests alike told me they're not anti-Jewish, but they are anti-Zionist. One of the most popular and controversial anti-Zionists is the leftist political commentator Hasan Piker.
So don't tell me that when you're peacefully trying to coexist with Israel, they let you peacefully coexist. Because what is going on in the West Bank is nothing but violence.
Piker has amassed more than 6 million followers across his social platforms with his blunt and aggressive reactions to right-wing politics, and particularly against Israel's current leadership. And he's recently entered the political battlefield, stumping for progressive politicians like New York City Mayor Zoran Mandani, Pennsylvania Congresswoman Summer Lee, and US Senate candidate for Michigan Abdul El-Sayed. He's also made speeches on college campuses like Yale.
Donald Trump let the Israelis drag the U.S. into this newest war with Iran after 3 years of bipartisan support for the genocide that Israel was committing on a different front of Israel's multiple ongoing wars of aggression. Zionism is the ethno-religious supremacist ideology that is exterminationist in principle.
Dude, this suit was so small. It's like, it's embarrassing. Look at this shit. Look at this shit. Look at how tiny this fucking suit is. Tiny suit. Thank God I've grown from this. And by that, I mean, I've gotten smaller, but my suits fit better. Holy shit, that's so bad. It looks like I got chicken legs on.
Born out of the wrong assessment that this was a land without people for a people without land. It required the extermination of the indigenous population, and that's precisely what has happened since its inception. And its final iteration of that, it has been the Gaza genocide that we watched unfold.
Would you acknowledge that that's a very different definition to what many Jews would consider Zionism?
Of course, people that want to support Israel are going to look at that and say, well, Zionism to me means something entirely different. Zionism to me...
But maybe it just does. Maybe it just does mean something different.
Yeah, but right? At the end of the day, it's still this ideology that is responsible for not only the inception of the Israeli state, but its current version.
When Hasan Piker...
Yeah, like, I don't care what people think about it. Like, I don't know why this is a decent counter argument, right? Like, oh, well, a lot of Jews think Zionism is something different than what it actually is. It's like, okay, but what is it actually, right? What is it actually? Which, in this interview, I also brought up Omar Bartov as well. I said, like, actually, that's not even true. There is, like, now a reconsideration of what Zionism has become. And I think a lot of people are fighting back against their social conditioning. Even Israeli Jews, like prominent Holocaust scholar Omar Bartov, has like now officially come to terms with this evolution of Zionism. Now, we might have a difference in opinion on what Zionism always was versus what Zionism has become, but we have no difference in opinion of what Zionism looks like in modernity in 2026. What Zionism looks like in 2026 is the expansionist Greater Israel Project and its continuation. Okay? That's it. But the issue here is we can't have a normal, sincere, adult conversation. We can't do sober analysis if you got charlatans like Jonathan Greenblatt who take this difference in opinion and turn it into something insidious, right? It's so fucking frustrating. It's so stupid.
Proudly says he's an anti-Zionist. Anti-Zionism is a form of anti-Semitism. It's the idea that Jewish people, unlike Muslims, unlike Christians, unlike all the people in the world, don't have a right to a state of their own. That's what it means.
Jonathan Greenblatt.
Like a guy who's combated far-right radicalization in a civil rights organization being like, what do you mean? Why can't Jews do manifest destiny in the same way that Christians did? Big dog. For years and years, your entire job was to literally combat white nationalists who fucking said America's a Christian nation and we need to fucking make sure that it's a Christian nation. What do you mean? This is directly antagonistic to the way that the ADL has billed itself as a civil rights organization. This is also antagonistic to the ADL's commentary and criticism over the likes of Nick Fuentes. This is why I say there is not a lot of difference between Christian supremacists and white supremacists. They are just fascists for their own in-group. And Jonathan Greenblatt, as a Zionist, is a fascist for his own in-group. Okay? That's it. Jonathan Greenblatt is a fascist for Jewish supremacists. Nick Fuentes is a fascist for white Christian supremacists. What he considers to be white Christian supremacists, which of course, you know, one can contest whether or not Nick Fuentes even fits that bill, considering that he is a in-the-closet gay Mexican, but also a white supremacist. But regardless, these are both fascist ideologies. They're both supremacist ideologies. It's just the in-group and the out-group have swapped.
Is the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League. The nonprofit was founded in 1913, and its mission is to combat anti-Semitism and broader discrimination around the world. Today, the ADL uses technology to track.
So I'm sorry, but if you're doing this, if you're promoting the ADL in this way, I think you're doing a disservice as a journalist to combating extremism. The ADL is an extremist organization. Okay?
And monitor increasing anti-Semitic rhetoric on social media and hate speech and violence against Jews across the globe.
I've spent a lot of time talking to young people, and their idea of Zionism, it's almost like if you talk to sort of young people on the left and on the right right now, they see this word Zionism and they see not just sort of self-determination, but they've come to understand Zionism as expansionism.
So I get that we have to try to understand the next generation where they're coming from.
Dude. It's a settler colonial enterprise. Of course it's expansionist. What are we talking about? The question, if we're being serious, the question is it appropriate or not? If you don't see the Arab indigenous population as human beings, you look at it and you say, well, this is taming the barbarians. This is civilizing this uncivilized area. And ironically enough, I did have this conversation with this guy. I hope he fucking featured at least some of it. I talked extensively about Jabotinsky, Theodore Herzl, early Zionists, and their assessment of what they were doing and their openness about how this was a colonialist project. I don't think that they featured any of that in this conversation. Where the fuck is the full cup, man? Release the full conversation.
At the same time, there are absolutes. They can look at things in different ways. But Zionism is the right of Jewish people to self-determination in their ancestral homeland. That's it. That's all it is. So you can be upset with Prime Minister Netanyahu and some of his policies, but he didn't invent Zionism any more than you could be upset with President Trump and some of his policies. He didn't invent kind of America or patriotism. Piker and others exploit the broad misunderstanding of what that word means, and they promote misunderstanding by using it as some kind of slur or trying to suggest it means something that it doesn't. My Zionism, and I am an unapologetic Zionist, I believe Israel has the right to exist.
The ADL has monitored anti-Semitism from the left and the right, but Greenblatt says they have seen increasing use of anti-Semitic rhetoric from the left over the conflicts in the Middle East. Piker has been a specific concern for the ADL. On their website, you can find a roughly 10-page research analysis of moments that they say Piker has used blatant anti-Semitic rhetoric.
You f***ing baying pig! You f***ing bloodthirsty, violent pig dog!
Pig dog is identified as an anti-Semitic.
That's not even a real anti-Semitic dog whistle, by the way. That's not. It's not. And that's really fucked up that they had to like invent an anti-Semitic dog whistle to make it seem like I'm saying anti-Semitic shit. That's how fucking easy it is, dude. They did a make it up after the fact moment. They used their prominence as an institution that fucking combats anti-Semitism to come up with a new dog whistle post hoc to make it seem like I was saying some anti-Semitic shit.
Insult, often used in conjunction with other anti-Jewish rhetoric.
That's crazy, dude. That's crazy. I guess in many respects, this should be expected. Also, I wasn't saying that to a Jewish person. Regardless, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. None of it matters. It's fucking bullshit. It's so funny because, like, one of the only people, there is literally a conversation that I had with Donny O'Sullivan on camera. Okay? A conversation that I had with Donny O'Sullivan on camera where Donny, and as we're on our way to the DNC, starts asking me about how I call Republicans hogs. And I tell him I call all matter of like right-wing reactionary people hogs or sometimes inbred. Okay? And he's like, don't you feel like that's mean? And I'm like, well, they're mean. Their whole worldview is nasty, right? So it's literally out there. The numerous instances, including on CNN, where I have, and that was featured on a CNN piece. So like, it's literally out there in these other mainstream media platforms where I've straight up been like, no, of course I call it hog. It's pejorative, but it's also affectionate at the same time as well. The thing is, they still do this, right? They still do this, but it doesn't work. So why are you still doing it? Like, what utility do you get out of trying to strike down one of the only motherfuckers out there who still takes the time out to try and combat anti-Semitism? I will never understand it, okay? I'll never understand it. You are destroying your legitimacy. You're destroying your legitimacy. The conversation in and of itself is already stupid. Even if you were bringing up an anti-Semitic person, like an actual anti-Semitic person, they can just turn around and go, look at fucking Randy Fine. Randy Fine is justifying current existing forms of violence. You want to fucking call me an anti-Semite. Most people are basically at that point where they just don't give a shit. So I always find it strange that they hyper-focus on a person who does give a shit. And the irony here is, this doesn't make people look at me differently. This doesn't make people look at me and go, I guess he's anti-Semitic. I guess this entire time I was wrong. He's just an anti-Semitic guy. You know, I feel really shameful about supporting him all these years when I heard him combat anti-Semitism. They look at this and they go, I guess James Fishback is not a fucking anti-Semite, or a secret third option where they go, we like it. Who cares? That's the current environment, and none of these fucking assholes are aware of it because they can't pull their goddamn heads out of their assholes. It's lodged up their own asses. They don't even realize that, like, a normie, the average American, does not give a fuck about anti-Semitism. It's so stupid.
Such as references to bloodthirsty, or in German, Schweinejuden, Jewish pigs.
That's a different word. You added Jews. Fuck. I didn't even know he did.
Do you regret any of the things that you said?
I mean, I've spoken for 21,000 hours on contentious subjects from a perspective that most Americans are not privy to. So I'm sure that there are things that I've said in heated moments because it's a very contentious environment. It's a medium that requires interaction. If they serve in the military and then they get their fucking untrained, inbred asses shipped into southern Lebanon, again, very funny. When I'm calling like a settler or something inbred, it's not different than me calling a neo-Nazi inbred. Is it nice? No. Is it kind? Absolutely not. It's vulgar, for sure. I understand that. But it's not saying like all Jews are inbred or anything like that. That's not what I meant. That's not what I mean at all.
You see how Piker is essentially saying the same thing that James Fishback told me? When he chooses to use a word like dog or inbred to define a specific racial group, Jews, he says, it's just colorful language, like Fishback calling cafeteria food goyslop. It's just crude language that gets taken as...
You're a fucking idiot, dude. I'm sorry. You are so fucking dumb. One, you added Jew in there to say like Schweinejuden, like Jewish pig, right? You added that in there. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not even speaking German. I'm speaking English. And secondly, you're such a fucking moron, dude. You are so stupid. If your goal is anything, like, here's why this is so dumb. Number one, this doesn't delegitimize me. It legitimizes James Fishback. So if your goal is to combat anti-Semitism, you're already fucked up, okay? You're already fucked up. You're platforming anti-Semites and you're making them look fucking reasonable. That's number one. Number two, if your goal is to defend the nation state of Israel, you already fucked up. It's not going to happen. Most people hate Israel for good reason. So now you got prominent anti-Semites looking like they're fucking reasonable in this conversation. Why would you do that? Why would you fucking do any of this? It doesn't make any sense. Who is this for? It's not 2016 anymore, man. People know. People know what's up. Oh my God. I just like, this doesn't even work to defend Israel. That's the other side of this. It doesn't even work to defend Israel. No one watches and goes, well, I'm going to really reconsider my position now. No, it just makes people go, I don't give a fuck about this. It's woke one, but for Israel supporters, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because for the last 3 years, people have seen a genocide unfold on their phones, okay? They saw it every day. And then they saw the Israeli state that was conducting this genocide turn around without a shred of irony and go, you know what's really the problem? My feelings. My feelings. When you tell me that this genocide is wrong. No one is going to take this seriously. Just give it up. Give it up. It's over. Give it up. Find a new method. This is the old method. It's not working. As a matter of fact, not only is it not working, it's actually backfiring. This is what makes people more anti-Semitic. This is what foments anti-Semitism. Because people go, I don't care. I don't care at all. And as a matter of fact, I like it. Okay, that's how they respond to it.
Anti-Semitic.
I think defending being vulgar is a silly exercise. It's like trying to explain a joke. It's never going to be funny.
it's already over. I'm telling you sincerely what I believe. I'm not precious with my language is what I'm saying.
But critics like Greenblatt.
Yeah, I had you know, it was really fucked up too. I remember this conversation. I literally told him, I know this is exactly what neo-Nazis do. And I had a meta conversation about the fucking piece that he ended up creating. The meta conversation that we had was, this is how anti-Semites get away with saying anti-Semitic shit, which is why you have to be extra careful and not conflating prominent critics of anti-Semitism who are also anti-Zionist with anti-Semites who claim to be anti-Israel, but are simply using Israel's unpopularity to slam in a much more nefarious subject, a much more nefarious goal to say this is how all Jews are. Because without realizing it, you yourself end up playing into that narrative. Wow. That's crazy.
Don't buy that.
Hasan can say whatever he wants. We bring the receipts. So I'm not going to judge him on what he says to you in a conversation. I'm going to judge him.
I just this is what's so funny about it. It's just like, if I wasn't such a stubborn person, if I wasn't so fucking autistic, I would have given up on this shit a long time ago. I would have been like, yeah, whatever, call me anti-Semitic. Who gives a shit? Plenty of people have already gone there, okay? Because the reality of the matter is the most consequential element here is Israel's foreign policy, what it's done in Gaza, what it's done in Lebanon, what it's doing in Iran, and how much Israel's foreign policy melts into American domestic policy. Americans realize this. They're frustrated by it. They hate it. They don't want it, okay? So all of these conversations about anti-Semitism are completely secondary to the real material harm that Palestinians have experienced, the real material harm that Lebanese people are experiencing currently, the real material harm that the Iranian population has experienced, and even the secondary consequences of that to the American society that broadly is frustrated with this unlimited tax dollars going to Israel and want it to change, and then get yelled at for being anti-Semitic, for being, the demands that they see about deplatforming. The demands that they see about deplatforming and the success that they see about deplatforming on numerous fronts. They hate that shit. They hate it. So for them, anti-Semitism does not have any weight any longer. Okay? For the longest time, anti-Semitism held a lot of weight. Okay? When you called someone an anti-Semite, that meant something. Now it doesn't mean anything. And it's because of this, and they're still doing it.
On the basis of what he says to his audience day after day after day. When you call Orthodox Jews inbred, when you describe the Jewish state as evil, as Hamas, a terror organization committed.
No, I didn't say it's as evil as Hamas. I said Israel is far more evil. It's more evil.
It's slaughtering Jewish people anywhere in the world. It says it in their charter.
Yeah.
Those are their words.
He's agreeing with Jonathan Greenblatt. What the fuck's wrong with this guy? Yeah, I know. There's a piece of this that I saw. Bro said I'd debate him on anti-Zionism if he simply concedes that Zionism is good and legitimate ahead of time.
Others have called out Piker's support for Hamas, the Palestinian militant group responsible for the October 7th attacks in Israel. He's described the group as the lesser evil in the ongoing conflict. Hamas's original 1988 founding charter explicitly called for the destruction of Israel and the killing of Jewish people worldwide. An updated version of the charter in 2017 removed references to the destruction of Israel.
Yeah, they did the PR. They did the PR thing, okay? They did the PR method. Like, dog, Hamas as an operation, as an organization, openly says their operations are only in occupied Palestinian territory. It's a nationalist group. Okay? It's a fucking nationalist group. They have no ambitions beyond the occupied territories. That's it. Its primary focus has always been the end of the occupation. Now, in 1988, when it was a fucking an Islamic charity, a Muslim Brotherhood cutout, yes, it had anti-Semitic language in its foundational charter. it's not the same fucking organization any longer. Not that it matters, because no one wants to talk about why Hamas even exists or why it became a militant resistance front, why it became the leader of the militant resistance front. Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that Israel killed all the Christian Palestinians, the secular Palestinians, the socialist Palestinians over and over and over again and reduced them into nothing. And the only group that survived that process, that culling, has been these guys. That's it. What the fuck are Palestinians supposed to do? If their goal is the end of the apartheid, the end of the occupation, yeah, they're going to fucking be like, all right, whatever. You know, I don't even agree with these guys on domestic policy. I don't agree with the way that they view the world, but I do agree with one thing. We got to fucking end this occupation. If that's your primary focus, you're going to find yourself taking up arms alongside them, which is precisely what happened.
They're declaring to confront what they call the Zionist project and upheld armed resistance.
What is this? The Nazis called Jews Jewish vermin. If you call a Jewish person vermin without adding Jewish, are you playing into the historical slur or not? Is this guy trying to fucking debate this shit? I'm using another example to explain the principle. Clearly, no way did I say he said that. Dog. I don't even use the term pig dog now because I'm like worried that people are going to think it's anti-Semitic because they just decided that it's now an anti-Semitic terminology. Having said that, if we're actually having a real conversation, a sincere conversation about it, no, pig dog is like red alert communists talking about fucking fascists, okay? Fascist capitalist pig dog is like the most common fucking utilization of it in modern pop culture. It's a new, it's such a not real issue that even fucking Jake Tapper didn't know what it was. Most people don't know what it was. They're like, oh, maybe I guess it's supposed to be an anti-Semitic term. I don't know. I'm supposed to assume that this is anti-Semitic. If you're supposed to assume that something is anti-Semitic, then it's probably not. Okay? It's stupid as fuck. As far as being pro-Hamas, okay, as far as being quote-unquote pro-Hamas, I made it very clear, okay? There are condemnable actions of the Palestinian resistance group. Thank you. There are actions that are condemnable at the end of the day, but you have to match them up to the systemic violence that Palestinians have experienced. In the same way as analyzing the Nat Turner Rebellion, as opposed to the systematic enforcement of chattel slavery. Which one is far worse than the other? Okay? Because the reality of the matter is the standard of violence is always set by the occupational forces, the occupying forces, the settler colony, okay? And resistance groups match that level of violence. And as violence towards civilians increase in frequency and its regularity, the magnitude of violence increases, so does the violence as a form of militant resistance. Okay, these guys didn't just come out of the gate swinging like this. That's why it's almost a cliche at this point where people say, look, the first intifada was fought with stones, the second one with bus bombings. Okay, it has evolved over time because the maintenance of an apartheid is an inherently violent endeavor. It's an unbelievably violent endeavor. You cannot just fucking section off certain aspects of society into these little pockets and bully them and kill them with regular frequency, with impunity, and arrest them permanently without a real trial, and then assume people not to fucking fight back. Of course they're going to fucking fight back militarily. Just because one is state violence and the other is violence against said state violence, oftentimes in a defensive posture and sometimes in an offensive posture, doesn't change that dynamic at all. So whenever people talk about like, oh, you're supporting Hamas, it's like, I believe the Palestinian people have a right to resist militarily. And it's not just my belief, it's international law. Okay? Some of that takes the form of war crimes. Absolutely. But even when you're making an assessment on the war crimes, you have to look at what they are responding to, the systematic violence, the unbelievable amount of war crimes. Israel's existence is a war crime, okay? Is one ginormous war crime. That's the reason why I don't fucking stand down when I say like lesser evil. When I do the Hamas is the lesser evil, I'm a lesser evil voter, that kind of thing, okay? Zohar Mamdani reveals that Taylor Swift has already paid the cost of permits and public resources used for her Madison Square Garden wedding at Hasan the Hun. Okay.
You said that you supported Hamas like 1,000 times
I
over
said Hamas
Israel.
is 1,000 times better than Israel.
Yeah.
The numbers probably have increased now that Israel is doing what it's doing to Gaza in Lebanon as well.
But aren't you just justifying violence with more violence, though? I mean, like that's what it sounds like. I mean, if ultimately the goal is peace and a diplomatic solution to this.
Yeah, I think this was the one moment where I got so mad at him that I don't know if they put that in there, but I straight up was like, dude, you think my statements and not the maintenance of an apartheid for 75 years, now 80 years, is what makes a path towards peace impossible? You think it's not the expansion of the settlements projects over the course of the last 4 or 5 decades now that has rendered the two-state solution impossible? It's my statements here in the United States of America. Get the fuck out of here. I'm analyzing what's going on.
Then doesn't it set back that cause by expressing in very stark terms support for a group that is engaged currently in acts of terrorism?
I think Israel is doing acts of terrorism. I think America.
But you
is
can
doing
be
acts of
against
terrorism.
both, can't you? I mean, you can be.
Well, of course, I am, right, and I have said that like any kind of targeting of civilians is a war crime. It's heinous. It's completely unacceptable. It's not an endorsement necessarily of militant resistance.
Sounds like an endorsement.
It's not an endorsement of militant resistance.
Well, let's be clear about
But it's a recognition. But it's a recognition of their desperation.
I think you could ask.
I should have said it's not an endorsement of all tactics of militant resistance, for the record. I should have said that. That was wrong of me to say. It's not an endorsement of militant resistance. It's a recognition of their desperation. I should have said it's not an endorsement of all of the things that militant resistance does, because there is a level of endorsement that I absolutely stand by, right? As far as like the permissibility inside of the boundaries of international law, and even beyond that, I'm much more understanding of like the desperation as well, because I think it's more important to recognize it. Having said that, as far as like militant resistance endorsed by international law that is perfectly defensible, things that Hezbollah does against the Israeli occupation in Lebanon is endorsable. It is literally valid. It is not a violation. Israel is violating international law in that situation. And the same goes for targeting military infrastructure, for targeting members of the military. When people say stuff like, oh, this guy was kidnapped from a tank, for example, you can't make that argument. You're not kidnapping someone from inside of a tank. A tank is a military asset, okay? That's not kidnapping. That's taking a prisoner of war, okay? It's very important.
Ask a lot of people who are kind of spouting anti-Zionism, like, does Israel have a right to exist? And most of them would say,
yeah, always justifying murder. If you say that a prolific serial killer is much worse than a person who has killed only one person, and that person happens to be the serial killer, you're obviously justifying murder. That's the argument. On the one hand, you got the fucking Zodiac killer. On the other hand, you got the guy whose parents have been victimized by the Zodiac killer, going and finding the Zodiac killer and killing them. And you go, well, I guess you endorse violence. It's so stupid. And most people understand that this is stupid. That's the problem for these guys, which, brings me back to my main point, which is that this is an unbelievably dumb way to go about this when you try to both sides the situation, when you try to fucking pair me up with people who don't make this assessment, who are cynically actually trying to launder anti-Semitic commentary into mainstream discourse, and they've succeeded. Part of the reason why they've succeeded is because of this dumb shit. If this is the only way you can combat anti-Israel sentiment, you're always going to fucking lose. And not only are you going to lose, you're also going to refuse to recognize that the bottom fell out of any kind of combating of anti-Semitism in this country. The bottom fell out a long time ago. These guys don't realize it, so they just keep fucking pumping this narrative over and over again. Oh, look, like even this guy is who's saying he's simply combating Zionism is actually saying that all Jews are violent, and he's violent too. He's violent towards Jews. Did you not realize he's violent towards Jews? But why not endorse militant resistance? Oh my God. Oh my God. Are you fucking brain dead? Are you fucking brain dead? I literally just said, I misspoke. I should have said, I don't endorse all forms of militant resistance, but that doesn't mean I don't endorse militant resistance. But of course, there are fucking dumb fucks who heard me say that and not my commentary beyond it. There have been a million instances where I've told you what my position on this is. Why? Why are you so dishonest?
Well, sure, we're okay with Israel as it is. We're just not okay with certain things that the Israeli government is doing.
That is totally legitimate. Like for someone to say, like, I'm okay with America, I just don't agree with what President Trump is doing.
Right.
Or I was okay with America, I didn't agree with what President Biden was doing.
Right.
That's normal. But when there are people who say that the country is more evil than the terrorists who blow up.
Yeah, dog. Sorry, sucks to suck. But yes, the people fucking resisting against 80 years of apartheid and occupation and blowing up little babies in their fucking homes and inside of their incubators, murdering them inside of their incubators is worse than the people fighting back against that. Sorry. Yeah, he said, I hate Rose, but respect Rhodesia in principle. I hate Adolf Hitler, but respect Nazi Germany in principle. See how stupid that is? It's dumb. It's dumb as fuck. And even the silliest person, even the dumbest person can understand how fucking stupid this sounds. Especially because, let's be real, this is the other side of the story. And I've said this for years. If you've been in here long enough, you know this. You've heard me say this. It is far more difficult to explain to an American the concept of anti-genocide and principled anti-Zionism than it is to educate an American on anti-Semitism and make them anti-Semitic. Okay? And these guys make that far, far, far more difficult to create an environment that is safe for Jews, that actually fights back against anti-Semitism, while simultaneously is principled in their anti-Zionist, anti-fascist, anti-genocide stance. Okay? That's it. Americans understand simple narratives. And it's a very simple narrative to say Jews control the media, Jews control finance, Jews control American foreign policy, Jews control American domestic policy, especially when you have prominent Jewish people that like, look at this, look, like this right here is creating anti-Semitism. You're sitting inside of a fucking mass surveillance room, okay? And you got this dumb fuck being like, yeah, all these people that criticize Israel, like, they just don't do it the way I want them to do it. Here is us surveilling them all across the country. What do you think people are going to look at this and think? They're going to go, wow, there's a real fucking headquarters where they're doing, it's like a villain lair. There's a headquarters for finding, finding Americans, identifying Americans, and surveilling Americans to make sure that they're not doing wrong, think? What do you think the average cornbread Iowan is going to think when they fucking see this? If they encounter this image alone, frame one, they're going to be like, oh my God, this is cartoonishly evil. It's like a fucking villain lair where you're mass surveilling. Yeah, ADL got a whole ass bat cave. Are we going to talk about this?
Buses and try to intentionally kill civilians. Like, something's wrong with that. I think that's kind of...
Yeah, you know what's wrong? You know what's the difference? You know what's the reality? There is, from the perspective of those who are killed, functionally no difference between a bus bombing and an American missile that blows up an entire city block. As a matter of fact, the American missile that blows up an entire city block kills more people. Okay? That's it. The underlying hidden premise here that is not so hidden is that Jonathan Greenblatt doesn't think victims of Israel are human beings because he is a supremacist, because he's a fucking fascist. That's it. That's the big difference between someone like myself and someone like Jonathan Greenblatt. I think Jews are human beings and so are Arabs who are not Jewish, okay? That's the difference. He doesn't. He only thinks one group is valuable. That's the problem. He only recognizes the humanity of one group. I recognize the humanity of both groups. That's the problem. So fucking disingenuous.
Kind of a warped set of values. I really do.
It's clear that the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East are changing the way that Americans view Israel's government and America's decades-long relationship.
And here's the thing, like, this is also a not so subtle disciplining operation, right? To be like, There's only one appropriate way to fucking, there's only my way to criticize Israel. You have to criticize Israel my way. And it's like, well, you don't get to have any legitimacy in this process. You know that, right? You don't get to have any legitimacy if we've heard the way you talk about Israel. Okay? At most, I'll listen to fucking Peter Beinart and I'll have my reasonable disagreements with him, and that's fine. But you don't get to have a say in this, Jonathan Greenblatt. That's it. That's the problem. Like, why do you think you get to surveil the way people criticize Israel? Like, what the fuck is this nonsense? Why do you think you get to have a say in the way people criticize Israel? Like, most people don't give a shit about this. Most people don't have this consideration. Why would they have this consideration?
With Israel. But it's also very clear that anti-Semitism is reaching extremely...
Can Peter Beinart be considered anti-Zionist? Yes, I think Peter Beinart is great. We have some disagreements, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day because I think he's a legitimate voice who recognizes the humanity of Palestinians, right? Like, he might have his old guy concerns with the way that I use my language, right? Like, we've had a long, extensive conversation about... we've had a long and extensive conversation about, like, me saying that Zionism is Nazism. Like, he takes offense to that. But at the end of the day, that doesn't get in the way of us, coalescing around a peace and emancipation for Palestinians. So it's fine. Those are some disagreements that we have. It doesn't matter, right? It's secondary. He is someone who is, at the end of the day, a person that's invested in the emancipatory cause, right?
I'm grateful that I spent...
Yeah, brilliant take for Peter Beinart on pro-Israelis who kept calling anyone that said Israel was withholding food from Gaza anti-Semitic, immediately shifted their talking point when Israel officially and publicly withheld food to, of course, Israel has to withhold food. What are you, crazy? You think they should be feeding their enemies? Their standard is what Israel does is right, and it should never be subject to any international or American pressure, and they're the terms of which you have to defend that change. That's what I mean by a position of worship rather than a position of support, which I think is de facto idolatry. This clip from a lecture I attended Peter 2 weeks ago in Vienna.
Part of my
Peter here highlights the argument that Israel supporters use to justify apartheid against Palestinians are identical to those used by South Africa's apartheid regime. There are people who are trying to kill us. Apartheid is protecting us from those guys. How well did equality work for the rest of Africa? When you look at Congo, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, do you see flourishing liberal democracies? We understand what Africa is like.
Dangerous levels, evident by the real-world violence against Jews.
We've been dealing with anti-Semitism since 1913, but we've been systematically tracking it for almost 50 years. And 2025 was one of the most violent periods we've seen in memory. Over 200 acts of violence committed against Jewish people in 2025, out of a total of 6,200 some odd anti-Semitic incidents. Synagogues, schools, offices like this one, literally, they're fortified like citadels with bulletproof glass and security guards and alarm systems. But the truth is, every Jewish establishment, every place where Jewish people walk or where they shop or where they socialize, you can't live behind, barbed wire and walls, which is why ultimately anti-Semitism is everyone's problem.
Whether you're on the left or the right, anti-Semitism is indeed everyone's problem. And that's true even for Jews who are somewhere in the middle, supporters of Israel who are outwardly opposed to Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government.
Either Israel is always right and you can't
Oh my
criticize
God,
it,
here
or
we
is-
go. Jeremy Ben-Ami. I would love to have a combo with him. See, I would love to have a combo because, like, Jeremy Ben-Ami at least is going to be a little bit more reasonable than fucking Jonathan Greenblatt. But I'm down to have a conversation with him. That's another guy who I'd love to talk to and explore the boundaries of his ideology and maybe the clear contradictions within liberal Zionism. Oh my God. But once again, this makes no fucking sense. You don't get to dictate how people fucking criticize Israel. You can complain about anti-Semitism, But I would say, as someone who is a steadfast advocate against anti-Semitism, you probably shouldn't put me in the fucking crosshairs. You can keep doing it if you want. Not saying Jeremy Ben-Ami does this, because I think he has disagreements with what I've said about Hamas and whatnot, but the J Street guys won't go so far as to say Hasan is anti-Semitic, at least in public, okay? At least on camera, right? But like, obviously Jonathan Greenblatt traffics in this ridiculous nonsense on a daily basis. Here's the thing. Nobody gets the cat's out of the bag, right? Israel is a pariah state. You don't get to fucking determine how people talk about it any longer, especially when the violence that Israel has contributed to in daily Palestinian existence and daily Lebanese existence is far greater than the hypothetical violence in the future that you are trying to prevent by claiming that like anti-Semitism is going to grow and that there's going to be violence that happens in the future. Because one is happening right now, the other one is potentially going to happen in the future. And then to package that argument up with what I'm doing as like also increasing that likelihood of violence in the future is fucking insane. It's insincere. And it's also leading to more anti-Semitism.
Always wrong, and it's the worst country in the world. And the truth lies somewhere in the middle. And so does the majority of the largest group of American Jews, and their opinions lie in the middle. Our organization is here to advocate for that, to try to change American policy and also change the public conversation, to have space to have that difficult conversation.
J Street is a liberal Zionist advocacy lobby group based in Washington, D.C. The group describes itself as the political home and voice for pro-Israel, pro-peace, pro-democracy Americans. J Street opposes the current Israeli government and its policies, but it also doesn't support the more extreme opinions of far-left commentators like Piker either.
I happen to be what's called a liberal Zionist. I believe that in the founding of the State of Israel, there were certain promises made and certain commitments made about the type of state it was going to be, that it would provide equality for all, regardless of their race and their religion and their gender, that it would be a light unto the nations, that it would pursue.
Yeah, what makes this funny is pre-October 7th, the ADL praised me for fighting anti-Semitism in my chat and in AOC's chat as well.
To the rule of law and equality under the law. And that, to me, is my Zionism. But the debate over what Zionism is has been going on for 130 years within the Jewish community. And you know, this Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich right-wing vision of Zionism is not what I mean when I say I believe in Zionism.
I'm curious as to whether you...
They fully just dropped discussing Fuentes and Fishback. This video is only about you now. I know.
Think the majority of the conversation that's going on about the relationship between America and Israel is of that format at the moment, or is it being dominated by more sort of shrill or louder voices? A very difficult part of what you do must be attempting to counteract the Nick Fuenteses of the world. Do you think that they have a lot of influence in how people think about Israel?
Well, I think you can look at the polling and you can see the influence. The more that your 30 seconds of a soundbite can get just clipped and sent around, the more you're going to have an influence these days. This is not limited just to the anti-Semitism question or the Israel question, but folks on the right and folks on the left using the most outrageous possible language and having no
folks on the left
to have an hour-long conversation that gets into nuance. And
that's bullshit. That's bullshit. Challenge for Jeremy Ben-Ami. Let's do it. Live streamed, no censorship, no editing, no cuts. Love to have you on the broadcast. Would love to have you on the broadcast for as long as you want to talk. We can have a conversation about this. Would love that. Bullshit. I did fucking 2 hours with the guy you're talking to, and he put like 3 seconds in it to just chop up my fucking statements and be like, see, he's just the same as James Fishback. That was insane.
Areas of gray and shades of gray.
I sat down with James Fishback and talked with him for an hour, and I said, you know, look, you say you want to have this conversation about Israeli influence in American politics, but then you go and you use terms like goy slop, which is a specific anti-Semitic dog whistle and you know exactly what you're doing. Obviously, the criticism and the virulent language that somebody like Hasan Piker uses, I would argue, is certainly not helpful. And I pressed him on that and I pushed him on that. And I said, you know, every time you say I'm 1,000 times more in support of Hamas than I am of Israel, yes, it gets views, but it also sort of cheapens this conversation and it takes the focus away from the more reasoned debate. Both of those sides are not helping when it comes to having this conversation. I think
that's bullshit. Yeah, also, Fishback is evasive about the Holocaust. Why the fuck are you talking about goy slop, my man? You pressed them on the Holocaust. Perhaps it's because you gotta hit it on like, oh well, he says he's just joking, but when he's evasive about the Holocaust, he's not joking, right?
that's fair to say, right?
We spend a lot more time, who's more dangerous, Nick Fuentes or Hasan Piker, and which words matter more or less. And that's interesting, but I think from a human point of view, how are we going to make less people die over the course of the years and decades ahead? J Street and I will spend more of our time trying to talk through, well, what should American policy be? How do we get the Israeli government and the governments of the Arab countries and the leadership of the Palestinian Authority, how do we get them to begin building on a different path towards actually ending this conflict so we stop having the people on the right and the left going at this way? And so many of us in this middle space are trying to show to young people that there are voices on the other side and try to elicit a little bit of empathy to try to match the anger and use that empathy to say, okay, there's a human being on the other side of this. It's not some horrible monster, a figment of your imagination. It's a human being with a family, with kids, and a desire to raise their kids in peace. And that's who's on the other side of all of this.
Ben-Ami makes an important point about the dangers of clippable moments overtaking real, nuanced discussion on ending the conflicts in the Middle East. But you could also argue that the damage is already being done here in America. Politicians like Fishback, and even some on the left who've used anti-Semitic talking points like defeated Democratic congressional candidate Maureen Galindo, are making headlines and drawing crowds with their vulgar, punchy lines. And supporters like the Groypers, who agree with Fishback's extreme rhetoric about Jewish people, are going to the polls and casting their votes. So what can be done? Well, for our part, with this series, we hope to cut through the vulgar and short clips.
Yeah, you really did. You really did that by fucking clipping me from a 2-hour fucking conversation where I addressed virtually every single counter without even hearing Ben-Ami's take, without hearing Jonathan Greenblatt's take. You asked me about these opinions. I delivered to you my perspective. And you fucking straight up only use like 2 minutes, man. That's nasty business. God, what a fucking hack job this was. Holy shit.
With real conversations. And we also tried to have another real discussion with 2 of our subjects to hopefully build some kind of new understanding. I asked Hasan Piker and Jonathan Greenblatt on camera if they would sit down for a conversation with each other, with me moderating. Piker said yes immediately. Wild idea. If we could broker it, would you sit down with him?
With Jonathan Greenblatt?
Yeah.
Oh, I would love to.
Okay.
I would love to have a conversation with Jonathan Greenblatt.
I'll pose the same question to him. Greenblatt was a bit more cautious. We've talked a lot about Hasan Piker here. He claims he's tried to sit down with you guys and tried to talk to you.
When was
said
that?
earlier, I don't know. He's claimed, that's his claim to it. Would you sit down with him? Would you sit down with him and me in a room and have a conversation?
Look, I'll sit down and talk to anyone. My only red line is if you dehumanize others.
Mm-hmm. Has he crossed that line?
Well, yeah, and saying that, Zionists, the things he said about Zionists, I think absolutely cross the line and create this space where it seems legitimate to murder Jewish people.
Mm-hmm.
That's fucking insane, okay? I've never said that. Shut the fuck up. I don't think that. I've never said that. You're a bitch.
So, if he would acknowledge the legitimacy of Zionism.
This is the nefarious part. Okay? This was clipped, and I made a joke about this. But this is the nefarious part, because he starts out with, he dehumanizes Jews. I don't. Right? And then he turns around and goes, Bro said, I'd debate him on anti-Zionism if he simply concedes that Zionism is good and legitimate ahead of time.
The Zionists have the same right as everyone else, even people whose views we don't like. That would be an important step forward.
The offer still stands.
Ridiculous shit, dude. Totally ridiculous. Yeah, you can only disagree with me if you agree with me. It's crazy. Yeah, why the fuck does... Dude, Israel defenders are on a level of entitlement I have never seen in my entire life. Where it's not just like the nation state, it's now the underpinning ideology that also should have extra special rights. You know what I mean? It's crazy. We've moved past like, does Israel have a right to exist, to like, does Zionism, you have to concede that Zionism, an ethno-religious supremacist ideology like Nazism, has to be considered legitimate and good before we can even argue on why it's illegitimate. That's insane, dude. That's insane. What do you mean? I've never seen such nefarious propaganda. He rat-fucked you in the article from today, too. Nick Fuentes to Hasan Piker, click by click. Anti-Semitism goes mainstream. Yeah, I see that. He literally compared me to Nick Fuentes and James Fishback. And then puts an annual study by Tel Aviv University found that 20 people have been killed in anti-Semitic attacks, like implying that I'm responsible for this. It's such a nasty, nasty fucking hit job. And the irony is, it doesn't work. So who is this for? Who is this for, if not a handful of people who are like terrified of Israel becoming a pariah state, who still have this mentality that like it can't do anything wrong. No wonder the channel gets 1,000 views a video for 8 million subs. Holy moly, that was such a horrible, entirely biased journalism. Oh. Anyway.
Now to the latest.
This was for Fox News to corroborate with another news agency law. Clearly cheap setup, paid for. Yeah. No, this is to like break out of the... I mean, it's over now. They already do this regardless, so it's like too late. But for the longest time, the criticisms that I received, the cynical, ridiculous criticisms that I received, mostly just came from like New York Post, mostly came from like Fox News, Daily Mail, right? So there was an appetite from the ADL and all these other like Zionist advocacy organizations to try to make this not look so right-wing and so one-sided. So like the USA Today took up that mantle to like normalize, Hasan Piker as an anti-Semite to a liberal audience. The problem is it's too late for that. You know? It's too late. It's not going to work. You know? It's not. Here's Peter Beinart comparing apartheid South Africa to Israel,
I think
by the way.
I'm
And
grateful that I
pee.
spent a significant part of my childhood in apartheid South Africa, because I'm able to remember, because now I think when people, almost everybody tends to think about defenses of apartheid, they think about it as people who were utterly benighted and absurd and racist, and how could anyone have been so vile and stupid as to believe that? But when I was in that environment as a child, in its own space, it didn't seem absurd at all. It seemed like it had a pretty clear logic to it. And I think the logic is pretty similar to the logic that I very, very frequently hear people in my own community invoke about Israel. The logic was something like, sure, apartheid may not be lovely or pretty, But you have to admit that there are people who are trying to kill us, right? We're not making that up, right? I mean, in American discourse, Nelson Mandela has been turned into this, this kind of Gandhi-esque figure, right? But that's not true. He's actually one of the people who helped turn the ANC away from nonviolence because he believed nonviolence had failed. The ANC was considered a terrorist organization by the United States. It was getting its arms from the Soviet Union, and it was devoted to armed resistance. It wasn't very good at it, but it was devoted to armed resistance. And so white South Africans looked at Mkhonto we Sizwe, the military wing of the ANC, and they said, apartheid is protecting us from these guys who very clearly are trying to kill us. And so you are coming from woke liberal. They didn't use the word woke, but they would have. You woke, naive liberal who don't understand anything about our part of the world are coming and telling us to take away the shield that protects us and leave us merciless. Why is that a risk that we would possibly want to take, right? Based on your morality. And they would also say, by the way, how well has it worked in the rest of Africa, right? When we look at Congo and Nigeria and Zimbabwe and Kenya, do we see flourishing, liberal democracies? So we're going to take a risk based on this when we understand what Africa is actually like, right? And I think that, in some ways, in retrospect, it seems we can understand the flaw in that logic, but I think it's worth just spelling it out, right? The Mkhonto we Sizwe was a response to a state that did not give Black South Africans a non-violent mechanism of having the state respond to their interests, right? Once Black South Africans got the right to vote, and Mandela was very, very, as we might say, Mahmir on this question. He would not abandon the armed resistance until literally there was a date for a free election. When by the end in the 80s, the South Africans were quite desperate to let him out of prison. They were afraid he was going to die in jail and that more radical figures were emerging. They asked him again and again, I think I read once 6 times, we will let you out if you only forswear violence. And he said, I will not forswear. The IRA took the same position. We will not forswear violence and put away our weapons until it is clear that we are going to have our rights. But once Black South Africans did have their rights, there was no need for Mkhonto we Sizwe to exist.
Bro, I got ops in my home, okay? I have opened my home to the opposition, okay? And I got ops in my chat because not a single person let a peep about where the fuck my chair had gone while I was taking a goddamn piss, okay? Ridiculous. Ops in my home, ops everywhere. Why do I need the Mossad up my ass when I got the Mossad, the Hasan Abi Mossad? I opened my home to these people, okay? I opened my home to these people. I opened my home to the chat. Ridiculous. Yeah, guard dog is not guarding shit. You ain't guarding shit. What kind of guard dog? What kind of guard dog are you? Huh? Go ahead. Ridiculous. Free Carla. How's Kai handling the heat? There is no heat in this house. We're in California. We're not in fucking communist New York. There's no 78 degrees principal out here, okay? She's so fat and beautiful. She is. She really is. I love your suit, but that tie is whack, dog. I disagree. I think this is a cool tie. I think you're wrong. Do you just have a pepper shaker on your desk? No, it's salt. For when I eat food on my desk every day. Anyway, let's continue.
Because black South Africans had the vote and they had a nonviolent mechanism to have the state listen to them. And that's, I think, it was this, it was this lack of understanding of the interplay between oppression and armed resistance that I think the people that I spent much of my childhood among South Africans, among white South Africans, did not understand, right? They also, I think, looked correctly at the fact that African countries were not doing particularly well in terms of liberal democracy or even political stability, and drew certain essentialized conclusions from that, right? Which they would, and then they would say, well, this is the way things are in Africa, And I'm very struck because I constantly hear American Jews and often Israeli Jews tell me that, the idea of equality under the law would not be possible in Israel-Palestine because, this is the Middle East, But I actually never heard a Palestinian say that. And I never heard a black South African say that either. And it wasn't because black South Africans thought that the political system in Congo and Nigeria was great, but they understood that the particular problems of these countries came from a particular historical trajectory from colonialism and Cold War, just like they do in Iraq or Syria or Egypt and whatever. And I think that memory from apartheid South Africa really has struck me because the kind of basic logic of the idea of defending Jewish supremacy, a system in which Jews have legal supremacy over Palestinians, I think is so similar. It's basically the idea that only supremacy can keep you safe. And it's particularly odd that it's so frequently invoked by American Jews, given that American Jews in our own country, right, are actually betting the safety of our own children on the maintenance of equality under the law, and that Americans, Jews that around the world who live in liberal democracies are actually significantly safer than Israel is, right? Because I think in large part, because Jewish supremacy produces tremendous violence, which then produces a counter-violence which makes everybody.
Yep. His point is that violence born out of the maintenance of the apartheid, which is an unbelievably violent affair, is inevitably going to lead to violence in its resistance. That was Peter Beinart, right? That was Peter Beinart, who has a fairly decent grasp on these affairs. He cooks all the time. We might have like certain disagreements on the language that I use or whatever, but ultimately it's irrelevant. It's secondary because I do think that he has a great grasp on this shit. Hey, Hasan, I've been on your div now for like 5 years and I've never taken the chance to say thank you for being such a financially available form of entertainment for me. As long as I've been able, I've been subscribed, and you have only made your channel more affordable as opposed to YouTube and Netflix that are getting worse and worse. So thanks, man. You got it. Of course. Once again, the only form of support for the Piker Broadcasting Service comes from subscriptions. If you would like to continue supporting independent media, continue supporting the People's Broadcasting Service, the Piker Broadcasting Service, all you need to do is subscribe, which you could do for $6 or for free, or by gifting a sub so that others can enjoy it. And the other thing I was going to say, of course, is that if we get a hype train going and we get to level 10, we carry the flame on the Hasan Abi broadcast on PBS, the People's Broadcasting Service, Piker Broadcasting Service. Cool tie. How much did Hufflepuff pay you? You shill. It's my dad's tie. Anyway, are you on Zyn 9 Ultras now? I think I got one pack of Zyn 9 Ultras. Wait, what the fuck? Ann Whitcomb was murdered? No. What the fuck? Ann Whitcomb? Police launch investigation into the death of former UK MP Ann Whitcomb. Police treating Ann Whitcomb's death as murder and hunting for white male suspect after body found with serious injuries. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer appeals for public's help to identify dangerous suspect. What the fuck? They said not politically motivated? Wait, what? What could it be? Man arrested on suspicion of murdering former UK politician. The police said they had arrested a 26-year-old British man after Ann Whitcomb, a 78-year-old former lawmaker, was found dead with serious injuries on Thursday. It's cool she was cunt. I mean, she was a common joke on this broadcast. And Whitcomb was, but that's insane. Yeah, I used to do her voice back in the day. A 26-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder in connection to the death of Ann Whitcomb. The man, who is a white British national, remains in police custody. I like that they have to reveal the race of the fucking assailant so that there aren't race riots, and hide it if it is a brown guy, in which case there are race riots. It won't stop people from doing race riots anyway. I feel like no matter what happens, the British public loves doing race riots. Anyway, let's